back with more college football coverage. And in this one, although I am a little late to it, the potential close of pretty much the biggest college football storyline across this offseason, at the very least, seems to be at play. At least from everything we know that has come out within the past week, per Adam Schefter, per Pete Thamel, per other sources around the landscape. You know, when we talked about this situation through as many loops as it has accrued over the course of time, the last one we ended up on was the potential of Brendan Sorsby to sue the NFL as an individual person, alongside the likes of Jeffrey Kessler, the famed sports lawyer, alongside him. Of course, with him, we've detailed he has an outstanding track record. And although the task might have seemed very difficult, going up against an entire league and its accompanying body at the same time, when you have him on your side, you do give yourself a great shot at winning. And a chance is worth something in the legal landscape. Even if, you know, the odds might not necessarily line up in your favor, you take a lot of weight with what you can get in a particular case. Sorsby has, again, self-admitted to gambling while in college. That information is true. The over 9,000 bets, the over $90,000, he self-admitted to it. And from that standpoint, he'd acknowledge what he'd done. But of course, through other contexts and the entire process leading up to the decision for the NFL to reject the supplemental draft, he, from their viewpoint, was not taking said accountability. And they figured that it would be much better for him to try his luck in 2027. Of course, taking a year off in any circumstance at the pro level, at the college level, it can truly hinder an athlete's ability to sustain a stagnant and even elite level of play for, you know, the high profile athletes out there. It can be hard to recover from that and retain those same abilities at that same level with a year's time off when there is so much else that could potentially be going on in that time span for you. It's hard. But with everything in motion, with every league at every turn rejecting him, the NFL rejecting their supplemental draft, the NCAA just completely, Texas Tech at least, moving on from him with pressure from the Big 12 after it was mentioned that they were going to try to file a federal suit and petition for sanctions to be imposed on Texas Tech if he were to step on the field. That tie cut off. The CFL even pitched in and said that tie would be cut off. There weren't many other places to turn. And it would have been like fighting through literal hell just to commandeer an entire lawsuit, an entire piece of litigation against the NFL. But from where we last left off, that is where things were seemingly headed. It could have been a very ugly road for both sides. We talked about it a little bit in the last video. It does look like a major power play from the NFL to send a message not just to Brendan Sorsby, but to other athletes who may be coming in and who may be committing some of the same things in college as we speak without any public understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. And that if you do commit these actions, you don't get a free pass into the NFL to escape from the problem. And, whether it is fair or not, whether it is optimal for them to do it with the connections that they have or not, it is currently affecting Brendan Sorsby right now, and you have to find a way to mitigate that. As we would hear from multiple sources last week, they came to a general consensus that, for both sides, it would be best for Brendan Sorsby to move forward without trying to enter into other leagues, without trying to pursue a form of litigation against the NFL. As this quote from ESPN would state, quote, "The NFL Players Association and quarterback Brendan Sorsby will not be pursuing litigation after the NFL's decision not to hold a supplemental draft this year, according to a memo sent to all 32 teams. The NFL, instead, Sorsby will shift his focus to preparation for the 2027 NFL Draft," end quote. And as the memo reads, "We have confirmed with the NFLPA and Brendan Sorsby that there will be no further litigation regarding his entry into the NFL, and that instead Mr. Sorsby will focus on his preparation for entry into the league via the 2027 NFL Draft. For purposes of league and CBA rules, Mr. Sorsby will be considered a draft-eligible player for the 2027 NFL Draft. Mr. Sorsby will not be eligible to sign an NFL player contract until the completion of the 2027 NFL Draft." So, just like that, we seem to have reached a bit of a conclusion, at least for now, in the context of what his playing career looks like moving forward. No, he won't be appearing in anything this season. And that, in and of itself, is a bit rough for him specifically. But then again, with everything that he had committed, in terms of the sports gambling activities, illegal as they already were, you kind of had an understanding of what you were getting yourself into at a specific point of time. This way, Sorsby does retain the right to be active as possible during this time, keeping up with his own regiments that he would likely have to set up for himself. Maybe he has his own personal trainer as well. You have constant time to do that and take your rest days. You, at the very least, get to sit back and still watch college football, even if you're not playing, and just try to get a sense of, the specific film that you would need to keep on specific players that you might have to deal with in this next draft, and other players in the NFL that you'll have to watch out for. It's not totally a wrap on Sorsby to just be completely out of the sports sphere just because he is not playing the game. The best thing he can do, especially for his mind, is to, tune into these things with a bird's eye view. You can't be out there and have these connections, especially in the college landscape or really in the NFL landscape. It'd be difficult to do that. But he can still, sit by the wayside, entertain himself watching those games, but also, take notes in a productive manner to actually learn and have some ideas of how to operate on a football field before going out there and executing the real thing in 2027. As other parts of the memo state as well, he'll be taken through the standard method of a typical prospect in the draft cycle. You will be able to enter that draft. I believe that a combine, a pro day event for him could still be there. He is also, as a different source stated, he's still eligible to enter the Senior Bowl when that kicks around. So, again, the opportunities for him to get reps are still going to be there. He's just not, especially in the height of these seasons and in any practice whatsoever, in any setting whatsoever, he's not allowed to have the contact with these other teams out here. He's got to do his own thing by his dolo and potentially with associates who aren't necessarily connected with those schools either, who may have more of a favor to him to help him out during this time. That's the best thing he can do to keep himself fresh and active during this time, because that's what it's going to take. There are so many distractions off the field, just generally, when you're taking that much time off. And this is where I think this is going to be a true test for him, specifically, considering that, he approached it from the standpoint of the gambling activities being a pattern of an addiction and a mental health struggle he had with it. The last thing you want to do in his position is to slip back into it while not playing during this time, because that still couldn't be used as an excuse. You've already admitted to it, you've apologized for it, and you've acknowledged that it happened. You don't want to repeat the same thing, now being granted some form of a second chance, just delayed for at least a year of time, because that would ruin everything for him. But even outside of the gambling stuff, anything that could truly, damage your PR, that could truly affect your life in a negative way, are things that you have to caution yourself for during this time. If you're Sorsby, this is still a person who would technically be a college athlete, if he were able to play. Even if he would be 23 years old, I believe by the time the next cycle comes in, you still have to adjust to the real world setting instead of being in the collegiate realm for majority of your time. It's not going to be so simple to navigate it on the day-to-day. Like, the best he can do is try. Again, I really was thinking, hey, it wasn't a guarantee, but you were thinking, hey, you try your chances at potentially pursuing a lawsuit. There could be an opportunity there for Brendan Sorsby. But again, just because there's a chance, and yes, some risks are worth taking, and that's anywhere, not just in the legal setting, but even if you have a small percentage, doesn't always bode well for you to take that risk. As this quote says right here, per Matthew Ween and a USA Today article, quote, Sorsby's plan to position himself as a union member in his now abandoned legal battle was unlikely to work, in Holden's estimation. Maurice Clarett notably tried that in court more than 20 years ago and lost, end quote. Clarett, for reference, was a former Ohio State running back who largely dealt with similar things to that of Brendan Sorsby before his eventual entry into the NFL, a career that didn't necessarily pan out accordingly, following a pretty good collegiate career, depending on the people that you may ask. And it's a fair thing to say. I mean, Sorsby was planning to seek the help of the NFLPA, but at the same time, they were willing, in a sense, to join him. He, by not entering into the NFL, by not being able to make the supplemental draft and, traverse through that pipeline, he would not have been a member of the union. He wouldn't be afforded some of the same protections that the players in here currently have. And that's before you even understand that, yes, while he himself was doing this in college, there are also a few players in the NFL who have had to face bans in real time and suspensions in the regular season and for entire regular seasons even, when it came to sports gambling as a result of them illegally doing so in NFL sanctioned areas and on real games in real time. And the article for USA Today laid out a few names, namely Calvin Ridley missed an entire season, Jameson Williams missed 6 games, and, that's just the tip of the iceberg. They mentioned, though, that luckily no players were suspended for gambling during the 2024 season. But even when you look at a player like Keyshawn Boutte, while his stuff was going on in college as well, there was still a massive investigation into him. And arguably, his case had far more implications. So to make the argument that Sorsby is being targeted by himself, even if the situation reads like that, because of the power play the NFL is implementing. At the same time, Brendan Sorsby is far from the first college athlete, far from the first potential NFL star to get himself involved in a situation like this. And it would be very hard to make that argument to a jury in a courtroom, even with a famed sports lawyer by your side. It would be hard to make a convincing case here. So, taking all that into consideration, it just did not really make a lot of sense at the end of the day for Sorsby to reach that point, knowing that if he were to continue on the path, he was going to face the most severe penalties out there. The NFL would truly try to lay down the law even further here. They would not allow him to get off scot-free at all. They would definitely impose their will. So you have to think about it from that standpoint. Yes, Sorsby misses a year potentially of on-field action. And again, all the stuff that he could do off the field, it still doesn't make up for that, but it at least keeps you engaged, keeps you thinking, and keeps you on your toes. You still got to go out there and execute, and there could still be rust there. That is a real thing that he will have to take into account. But you'd much rather go through that than try to face the NFL's wrath in this sense, in the legal way, before you even get a chance to enter the league. At least the door, although it's ajar and it's slammed shut for now, it is still open for him in the future. So they haven't totally rejected his status as a prospect for this upcoming draft. He still gets an opportunity to go through the standard cycle like everyone else and can still salvage a potential career out of it. As this quote from ESPN also states, the NFL will not discipline Sorsby for currently known prior misconduct, but retains the right to investigate his conduct beyond what is in the current public filings, an NFL source told NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. It also reserves the right to take college misconduct into consideration in setting discipline for any future violations, the source told Rappaport. So again, a lot of the stuff that the NFL was using, and even the memo that they sent out to Sorsby that rejected his entry into the supplemental draft, kind of laid it out as well. Most of what they based their argument off of was from the information that was already placed into the public eye. They themselves did not have a full scope on an investigation into everything that Brendan Sorsby might have been involved in. They mainly sourced everything from what was already reported. But it still looks like here they will now do their own independent investigation on this matter. So again, for now it is done. But to prevent any other measures from happening in the future, they want to double check, triple check this background and see if there is anything potentially more severe, more damning on Brendan Sorsby's name that could still make a fit into the league as a rookie difficult to stomach for a general fan base and difficult to stomach for members around the sport, with the kinds of implications that some of that information might end up having if it proves to be negative. And, as this USA Today article also puts it, it's like, yes, he'll still be able to enter the NFL, but the fact that they are holding off on this for a year does not take away from the fact that some of the concerns are fairly legitimate, in that even when he enters the league formally in the proper way that they're lining out at this point, it's not like people are all of a sudden just going to drop everything that they have heard over the past few months and just forget about it. There will still be a lot of thought into the ramifications of having Sorsby and having this cloud looming over his head, even if it won't be as large in a year. Just the idea of them bringing the case back up, rehashing some of the details, and really having to walk teams and walk himself through ways to deal with these kinds of questions. It's still just a lot to take in right now. As it says here, quote, "It struck me that there were luckily enough people that had that concern, that they wanted to not necessarily bar him, but more like, we need to take our time to think through how we're going to do this via Matthew Wine, because in all likelihood, he's not going to be the last person with this issue." End quote. Like, fair enough. And, there's a lot to take into that portion of the quote as well, but I'll get to that in a second. And, like some of the questions here, they say, hey, did he do it because it was the right play? Did he do it because he relapsed? Did he do it to satisfy a parlay? Did he do this action to slide for a first down on a run just to meet the exact number of total yardage he might have needed in a game? Or any kind of question you could think of in regards to that. Those are some questions that even broadcasters in the media side of things might have to ask live on air as they are trying to focus on the flow of a game. Your play-by-play, your color man, having to take multiple seconds over what they might need to disseminate a specific amount of information just to bring up the fact that Sorsby may still be involved in some of these things. Or that, even in a joking manner, like, the stain has never left the individual. This is all public information. It's gotten all over the internet and it has spread like wildfire. Once it's out there, it's out there. It is as simple as that. And it's going to take a long time for Sorsby to get in the good graces of the general public, let alone the NFL, let alone specific members of the media at this point, let alone the NCAA, let alone Texas Tech. It has to take so much work. And it does start with him at the end of the day. So, for this statement here, officially from him, as it states, quote, "There has been a lot of news about me out there, and I want to share this statement to make sure things are clear. I accept 100% responsibility for my actions. I did not have control of my gambling problem, and it took getting caught for me to realize that. But it was truly the best thing that could have happened to me. Because of this, I have been able to get the help I need and fully focus on my recovery. The news about the supplemental draft changes nothing about my recovery journey. I will continue to take it one day at a time, focusing on making myself better throughout this process and making sure to share what I have learned and will continue to learn with others going forward. I am fully committed to being the best version of myself that I can be while getting ready for the 2027 draft. God makes no mistakes, and I look forward to seeing the good that is to come from this. So it's a fair statement on his end, although I think some people would still take an issue of, just saying that he did not have control of it. If you aren't of the belief that this is a mental health thing or an addiction that he did lose control of as it continued. If you're not of that belief, you might not be convinced by what he's saying there. But again, it's worth taking into consideration if this is how it is being viewed over this course of time. And Sorsby, for him, that statement is just the first step. A lot of these actions are going to be things that the masses won't see. They're not going to see him putting in those hours and putting in the extra hours even. Like, you don't want to overexert yourself, but at the same time, knowing that you are not going to be on the football field for pretty much a year and some change, at the very least, it will be 8 months or so before the combine. So you have a long, and I mean a long way, to go from now till then. And even later for a pro day with potential teammates of yours from college, if he were to have suited up during this time. It's almost like to match the same exact level of production as these other players, he is going to have to overcompensate in that regard. And there can't be any shortcut there for him. He's going to have to put in overtime shifts like you would not believe. But that's what it's going to take. And if he can do that, from that alone, he would probably be able to pick up a lot more respect from the general collection of people out there covering the sport, talking about the sport, etc. You may have put yourself in this situation with your actions, but you are trying and you are even overexceeding the amount of work that it would take to reach this point and to hopefully improve your situation. And that would be commendable if he can pull it off. But only time will tell if he can. So we shall see. Like, the people out there, at least those who aren't, subscribing into all those things, they do still believe that Sorsby would be a top-ranked prospect. In fact, as this CBS Sports article also suggests, in terms of Big 12 quarterbacks all time, in history there have only been 7 with 45 or more passing touchdowns and 1,000 or more rushing yards in a 2-year span. Brendan Sorsby became the 7th, alongside Sam Ehlinger, Kyler Murray, Trayvon Boykin, Robert Griffin III, Colt McCoy, and Zach Robinson. Now, again, a lot of those quarterbacks, but in terms of collegiate talk here, those are a pretty good combination of quarterbacks to be on this list with. Again, the question was never about the talent, but with this information coming out since April, pretty much, late April, if you will, how do you distance the idea of talent from the outlook of a quarterback who will have the ball in his hands at pretty much every offensive snap of the game, being able to potentially manipulate and cheat the system in real time? Because this is what Sorsby was alleged to do. And he admitted to this illegal practice of sports betting on sports across the leagues, not just in the NCAA, but on other leagues as well. you just have to find a way to distance yourself from that. They could not deal with the thought of this being the case. And so, while the action may seem drastic, it is much better for him to at least hold off for a year and see exactly what happens from there. Man. Now, again, with all that in mind, it is technically something that could be ongoing. Because you could imagine that the questions aren't just going to go away just because he's now an eligible prospect for the cycle, just because he is in the room with these people, with these coaches, with other media members from different shows and different networks and everything. That doesn't mean that it's just going to magically wither away. They will still be there in months from now, in a year's time. So from that standpoint, you could probably see a continuation. And in those responses as well, to truly test just how much Sorsby has grown, you probably will see a barrage of just loaded questions sent his way. Because this quite literally took over a lot of the college football world in regards to everything happening in the offseason. Even more than spring training, even more than some recruitment updates across schools and across different conferences. It has dominated the headlines for this long. That can slow down, but they are sure to pick right back up once he suits up for the combine, which I think would be the earliest thing he can attend as a part of the draft cycle. So that's not just going to magically go away, but he has to keep his head down, keep himself steady, and when he's doing that, when he's committing to those actions, keeping his body intact, keeping his mind sharp, and keeping himself somewhat engaged into the landscape in a truly healthy and legal way by watching the games. And picking up on film that way, then it's he'll remain ready. And, I would hope that he can get ready. For as much that has been said during this time, this is still a player who is being afforded a massive opportunity right now. He may not be granted that right immediately, but it is still on the table. And anything that he can do to ensure that he still has access to it by the time we reach that road, he must. It is that simple. So, more power to him in that regard. But to, approach it from this standpoint as well, to kind of close it out. Because just stick with that last portion of the quote that I read earlier from Ween. He may very well not be the last person with the issue. And like I said, you could very much have athletes in collegiate college football rather, doing some of the same stuff right now that isn't reported. It's pretty much about every other week to month that you're hearing something in the college basketball world about players and about entire teams being involved in betting scandals across the divisions. Not even just in D1. There have been some D2 cases out about it. It gets wild when you understand just how much student athletes, general athletes, may very well be getting themselves involved in the sports gambling world right now. And granted, the industry itself has grown over the years. So from that perspective, it's kind of obvious. At the same time, when you have the major leagues having all of these relationships with the sports betting sites out there, and even with ones that have just started to come up, like Underdog, like Kalshi, like Polymarket, even, like, you're promoting this at such a high level. The exposure is just ridiculous to this point. With the advent of technology and social media in general. So it's all out there. Anyone can truly go on a site right now, as long as you are a legal age, and place a bet. Even then, you can lie about your age and still find a way somehow to place a bet. So it just makes it dangerous. And with these players constantly coming through and being involved in illegal practices, when it comes to sports betting, when it comes to sports gambling, the fundamental question remains, can the league implement a genuine structure around these actions to prevent players coming up through the pipeline from gambling ever again? Can they find a way somehow to outlaw the practice? Because it's one thing for the league to take this hard stance and, punish this 22-year-old severely for his actions. Then you can have another year where a 21-year-old redshirt sophomore can enter the NFL with the same problem. And you're going to run through the same cycle over and over and over again. It gets tiring. And it's because that structure just lacks completely. You can tell it all you want to, but without true implementation, every player is just going to continue to be encouraged indirectly to gamble. There is not much that has been done to really stop and truly put a stop to players committing to said actions. And while this could send a message with what is happening to Sorsby, you can only wonder if that would still truly be enough for some people. And for that select few, it may not prove to be. So again, it's going to take all the pro leagues, really, generally speaking, the NFL specifically in this case, you have to truly set the standard here. You have to set some form of precedent, and you need to make a true law surrounding it. Like the rules, there are some rules on it in their constitution, in their rule book, but you have to properly define it. You have to be forthcoming with it. You can't try to allude to the idea as much as they have, because those allusions are clearly still laying down a foundation for other players to just build off of for all the wrong reasons. And it just continues to go on. Until that happens, there is very much a possibility you'd have another Brendan Sorsby-like situation. Honestly, not that far from now. So again, it's the close to this case temporarily. But when it comes to the larger idea, the NFL simply needs to do something about the sports gambling issue. And they have to do something that actually makes sense, rather than just telling people that they have a zero tolerance policy for it. can you actually establish some form of true power and define that in real time? Same goes for the NCAA. After all, to end it off, this quote summed it up perfectly. Perfectly. I tell you, as it said, the NFL is wielding this power, but per this USA Today quote, the Sorsby situation was simply the latest test in the NCAA's power, Holden said. What's left of it, he added, that left the NFL to exert its own. Think about that for a second. And again, while I did in one of the earlier videos go ballistic on the NCAA and the fact that we continue to have these talks about them not being able to self-govern, it says a lot for the NFL to have to step in and literally say for a draft that they rarely use, we're not going to allow this player to enter it, because the NCAA allowed this slippery slope to take place for Brendan Sorsby to somehow still be eligible enough to gain a full season of eligibility for this upcoming year. And it still went through even more twists when the Big 12 decided that they were going to seek sanctions. Would the NCAA have even implemented them? We couldn't even be so sure. You can, look at the NFL and say that, hey, maybe it is unfair to give Sorsby all this heat and to come after him like this. Well, at the same time, if the NCAA were effectively upholding their positions and, quite frankly, doing their job, this wouldn't have had to be a problem for the NFL to handle. There would be no way for Sorsby to even draw up a method to get into the NFL, because the NCAA promptly would have shot the entire pursuit and attempt down where it stood. If they could actually use their power in the right ways, not like in years past with more traditional rules that just completely denied the rights of the athlete, but to adjust with the times, understand that the athlete has rights, but still know your own place and understand that there are genuinely things in your organization that need to be upheld with an iron fist. It is hard to balance that in the modern day where everything can be placed under a microscope, and even the most minute detail can, end up going through massive changes in the court of public opinion because they might not take a liking to it. That stuff can be true. But when it comes to sports gambling, when it's in your bylaws that you already don't allow it, that's a lot different from what the NFL might suggest. It is in your constitution. It has been there for years, for decades, essentially. And you'd had it in other practices when it came to the illegal boosters before you even got to the Ed O'Bannon case. All of the other things that led to sanctions previously, years-long sanctions, decades-long sanctions for different teams across the college football world. Back in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. That might be viewed as extreme, but with you not using your power correctly, the NFL had to clean it up. So just take that quote in mind. Because again, it's not just on the pro leagues at the end of the day. It all goes back, it all roots back to college football. This is where it took place. This is where someone allowed it to happen. Whether you want to look at a school like Indiana specifically, as his agent pointed out, okay, whether you want to look at Cincinnati specifically as a school, okay, whatever. Texas Tech, whatever. Got to look at the entire body here. They all are under the NCAA, and this took place on their ground, and they were not able to, by the end of it, say that they played the central factor in the denial of eligibility for Brendan Sorsby. The only reason why they came out with a slight win here is because he himself came to the conclusion that it was best for him to not suit up. He went to the court to overturn the ruling. And as a result, his eligibility was revoked and the initial ruling stood. As it should have already. Again, you don't allow something like that to happen. If you truly have all your affairs in order with the massive organization that you have built up over time, they're just not there right now. So a lot of that has got to change. But seriously, best of luck to Brendan Sorsby in this entire equation. Yeah, again, you just cannot, under any circumstances, gamble at all. There is a massive conflict of interest, and even the NCAA bylaw said as such. Because it goes after members of the team, it goes after student athletes, it goes after people who are literally serving on these teams, participating in those things. You can't do it. And you should not be allowed to. Hopefully, Sorsby has actually learned his lesson. And he can, go ahead and really perform well in all these pre-draft events and have what could be a very successful career in the NFL. But man, for the other athletes coming up, you just cannot do it. And it does send a message to the major leagues as well. It's like, if this isn't enough to tell you, to wake you up and give you a warning that you need to do something far more effective than this in your rule books, I don't know what more to say. But that will do it for this one. Peace.